to my world of stuff. My name is Paul Mount. A slightly different video for you tonight. It's Saturday night, and as you'll have noticed, I'm not in my usual recording place, which is the cinema room / garage. I'm actually up in my office, which I used to do a lot of my earlier videos in. Back in the day, a couple of years ago when I started the channel, before I sorted out the cinema room. This is the office where I do my writing. This is where I do my editing on my laptop, on which I'm currently recording with a webcam and an independent microphone. I normally record my videos on my phone, but I'm in the cinema room because I wanted to get another video up after having done my I'm back this week video yesterday. Once again, the weather has defeated me. I'm not going out in this torrential rain that we've got at the moment. In fact, it's not as bad as we were anticipating. We were promised Storm Kathleen, but I think it's sort of missed us and is on the west coast of Wales a little bit. So we just got the usual miserable grey weather, pouring rain, etc, etc. But I did want to do a video, a show and tell physical media update. Not a vast amount of things. Here's the selection of new bits that I have, which I will show you in a moment. Obviously, because I've not been well, I haven't been out to the shops, but I have picked up a few things online, a couple of bargains, a couple of new releases that I felt I had to have. So let's crack on with the new bits and pieces. It's one CD and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, about 7 4K and Blu-Rays and one big book. So let's crack on with it. In terms of the physical media, the discs themselves, then I'm going to start off with 2 new releases from 88 Films. Now, 88 Films are one of the boutique labels who release cult classic films with new material and new bits and pieces and new features and scrubbed up on 4K and Blu-ray. And I picked up 2 titles that they released the week before last, 2 classic horror films from the 60s and 70s. They're available on 4K and Blu-ray, but I picked up the Blu-ray editions of, this is one of the great horror films. This is Witchfinder General, directed by a troubled director called Michael Reeves. I think he only made about 2 or 3 films. But this is an absolute classic film, starring Vincent Price as Matthew Hopkins, the notorious 17th century witchfinder of the English Civil War. Matthew Hopkins basically traversing the country, tracking down witches. This is a very atmospheric film, and this came along sort of during the height of Hammer, I suppose, really, in 1968, I think it was, and totally subverted people's expectations of British horror films. And it was in a genre of horror films that we now know as folk horror, not your typical sort of vampire films, werewolf films, ghost films, something a bit different. Horror that originated in British rural culture, country culture, the old ways of witchcraft and dark arts and so on. This is a very strong, very disturbing film, which I saw for the first time in the 1970s, I suppose, and it has stuck with me. It stars a young Ian Ogilvy and Patrick Wymark, Hilary Dwyer. It's a good solid cast of British thesps, led of course by the inimitable Vincent Price, who at the time I think had a reputation of being slightly camp and doing these Roger Corman type films, and of course he was sort of not long playing Egghead in the Batman TV series. This is something totally different, and I think his appearance in the film might possibly lead some people to think that this isn't a particularly serious horror film, but it really is very strong, very powerful, very disturbing, and very evocative of the era it's set in. So I picked up the Blu-ray edition. As you can see, it's got a lovely sort of slightly sleek slip cover, which you take off, and there's the Blu-ray edition, and it has inside a reversible sleeve. I'm not that keen on the original. I think that the new one that they've got is pretty striking. In fact, it's not bad, the original. And it's got a very nice souvenir booklet, because I think in the States the film's called The Conqueror Worm, and there's a lovely illustrated book which gives some history of the film, how it was made and how it was received. An absolute classic horror film from the 60s, but as I said, don't go in expecting something Hammer, because it's a little bit more sophisticated than that. I also picked up from 88 Films a film called Blood on Satan's Claw. This dates back to I think 1971 and was directed by Piers Haggard. It's, again, very much in the same vein in a way, all to do with witchcraft and sacrifice and demonic possession and so on. In the early 18th century, a deformed skull is discovered. It has an intact eye and strange fur, but when the skull disappears, the villagers, especially children, become afflicted by its supernatural powers. Very strong, very powerful film. I've only seen this once or twice, so I'm looking forward to rewatching it. It's actually currently in my Blu-ray player because I've been looking at some of the special features. Again, stars Patrick Wyman, Linda Hayden, who was a sort of ingenue of the horror world at the time. Wendy Padbury, who'd only recently been in Doctor Who, she has quite a startling role in this film. Simon Williams, Barry Andrews. It's a really good, strong cast, and it's quite a disturbing film. It's got, in terms of the Blu-ray itself, it's got the same sort of sleek sort of cover, quite a solid cover as well, not the sort of flexible sort of slipcase that we often have. As I say, the disc isn't in here because it's in my machine at the moment. I've been watching some of the special features. There's the alternative cover, which is not quite as good, and again it's got a very informative booklet about the history of the film with some photographs and the old lobby cards. Some of you may be old enough to remember when cinemas had lobby cards outside, photographs, images, publicity images from the film that you're going to see. Some of these are quite collectible now. So yes, a very nice set. I've started watching some of the special features and I'm quite looking forward to seeing the film again because I've only seen it once or twice, and it's quite a striking effort. This is something I picked up just before I was ill. I went to the Sherman Theatre in Cardiff to see a comedian by the name of Richard Herring. Some of you may know him. Some of you may know him from his partnership with Stuart Lee back in the 1990s when they had a sort of a slightly subversive double act who had some little success on British television, on the BBC. Richard Herring now does a podcast, an interview sort of podcast. It's called the Leicester Square podcast, which he now tours around the country interviewing celebrities and things, and he did a show in the Sherman Theatre about a month ago now, and this was about the time I was just starting to feel a bit ill. I was just getting me tickly throat, but I went along to see the show. Very funny. He had a couple of guests including Charlotte Church, who was, as you might expect from Charlotte Church. Afterwards he does because he's not a famous comedian, he sells his own merchandise at a stall at the end of the show, and I picked up this DVD release of a series called Fist of Fun that he and Stuart Lee made back in the 1990s. He licensed the original episodes from the BBC and released them on a label called Go Faster Stripe, which I think is actually based in Cardiff, and it was released a few years ago on this 2 DVD set because there were 2 series of 6 episodes. I haven't seen it for years and I remember liking it at the time, so I picked up a copy of this, and Mr. Richard Herring signed it for me, so that's my signed copy of Fist of Fun. This next one I might have included in my last physical media update about 5-6 weeks ago, but I'm too lazy to go back and have a look, so in case I didn't, it's just called A Doombolt Chase. This is a 6-part ITV children's drama from back in the 70s when ITV used to make quite sophisticated and intelligent sort of genre dramas for children. This stars Peter Vaughan, Ewan Solon, Frederick Yeager, John Woodnutt, and is written by Don Houghton, who'd written a couple of Doctor Who stories in the 70s and a couple of Hammer horror films. 6-part sort of adventure science fiction serial from 1978 from Network. This came out from Network a few years ago. I picked this up from Amazon for about $6.99 last month. Other newish releases, I'll show you this one. I had to pick up this, of course. Still my favourite film of the year so far, Poor Things. Yorgos Lanthimos' bizarre but endlessly rewatchable, I don't care what people say, this is a film you watch again and again. His sort of take on Frankenstein, with an incredible performance from Emma Stone, superb support from Mark Ruffalo, Willem Dafoe, Rami Youssef, a stunning, bizarre film that will completely captivate you. This came out a couple of weeks ago. It comes, as is often the way these days, in one of these eco cases. It doesn't particularly bother me. It's a slim case. It's got a slip cover. That again doesn't particularly bother me. But yeah, it just leaves a bit more room on the shelves. Really, if you've got a smaller case. So yeah, that's Poor Things, which is out now, and I'm looking forward to rewatching that. I picked this up. This was available for about $9.99, I think, from Zavvi a couple of weeks ago. They've been doing a lot of the Mondo Marvel Steelbook editions, and although Marvel is slightly off the ball at the moment, I couldn't resist picking up the Mondo Steelbook of Ant-Man and the Wasp, which was released a few years ago. Steelbook edition is very nice. It comes in a nice protective sleeve. When you take it off, it's got the J-card fixed to the back, the transparent sleeve with Ant-Man and the Wasp, and a very nice Steelbook edition with a sort of slightly pop art sort of cover to it. Steelbook. Nice, very nice edition. As I said, Marvel's off the boil, so I'm not sort of rushing to buy Marvel things the way I might once have done. But I do like the Ant-Man films, particularly the first two. I've got it on 4K already, but this was, a nice addition to add to the collection. Nice spine. Yeah, I was very pleased to get this. I also got, I think this was about $9.99 as well when Zavvi were doing one of their promotions. This is the Steelbook edition of M. Night Shyamalan's most recent film. I'm getting confused about where to show them on this camera. Knock at the Cabin. One of his better films of recent vintage. This again is a Steelbook edition. Haven't actually opened it yet. It's still sort of sealed there. I'm not going to tear it open at this stage. But yeah, it's a nice, striking cover. Sort of threatening image of the cabin and the hand reaching out towards the young family who have a terrible decision to make, a terrible choice to make. If you've seen the film, you'll know what that is. Very good. And it's a nice Steelbook, which was about $9.99. The final thing to show you is a book. In fact, not quite the final thing, there's two. I'll show you the book anyway. You may remember, end of last year, I think I showed you the first volume of the Look-In collected comics for the Tomorrow People, the 1970s answer to Doctor Who, the story of the next stage in human evolution, which ran for about 6 years on ITV, tea times on Mondays or Wednesdays. And Look-In comic ran the official comic strip, which ran almost as long as the TV series. Volume 1 came out last year, published by Chinbeard Books. It's a print-on-demand thing. And Volume 2 has just come out. A nice big hefty tome, as you can see. These are really nice, the ultimate in niche products, I think, for people who remember these sorts of TV shows. And this is full of the rest of the comic strips. And I think the Tomorrow People had been largely relegated to black and white by now in Look-In, but the colour, the illustrations are fantastic. It's by one of my favourite comic strip artists in Britain of that period, Mike Noble, who did some really dynamic action illustrations, and yeah, it's a really nice selection of very imaginative sci-fi stories, which took the show way out of the rather tiny TV budget that it had until much bigger, broader stories. So I've read the first couple of stories there. Sort of good fun, simplistic science fiction stories. I'm looking forward to cracking on with that. The other thing I think I will show you, I still buy CDs, as I might have shown you in the past. I like having CDs. I'm very much going back towards that particular aspect of physical media. I never really gave up CDs, but didn't buy very many. I'm not one for streaming music. I just like to own it. I do pick up a few CDs, but as is my way, tend to wait until the price comes down a bit. Madness, the great survivors of the two-tone era from the 70s, still going strong, still making music, and last year they had their first ever #1 album. It was called Theatre of the Absurd Presents Madness, C'est la Vie. It wasn't #1 for very long. It went in and it dropped down the charts fairly quickly. But for the purposes of chart statistics, Madness had a #1 album. And the first single was called Sail Away, which I really liked because it wasn't a hit, because there's no rapping on it, so it was never going to be a hit. But this is a nice gatefold sleeve album. It's got a sort of a concept with like a prologue, Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, Act 4 and finale. Nice little booklet. I haven't actually listened to it yet, so I'm looking forward to putting that on next week when I'm finally fully recovered from my various coughs and splutters. So anyway, that's the bits and pieces that I've picked up. I was going to leave it for a few days because I've got a couple more things on the way, which I've picked up, and I will be back in the shops shortly when I'm back on my feet, and I'm very nearly there. But I thought I'd just put this video together for you tonight, for you to have a look at the odds and sods I've picked up in the last 2 or 3 weeks. Right, where are we now? We're on Saturday night. Tomorrow is King Kong, or Godzilla X Kong, which I'm going to see tomorrow afternoon, and I might try and see something else as well. I might do a double bill. In terms of my recovery, I'm still moving forward, still having trouble sleeping because I've still got this pain in my side, which is aggravated by coughing, but I'm not coughing quite as much, so I'm hoping later on this week it'll sort of finally pass and I'll be back to normal, whatever that is. But yeah, there's more videos coming, film reviews. As I mentioned, I think in my last video, there's a TV recommendation I'm quite keen to do for 2 shows that I watched while I've been unwell, which are highly recommended. I want to do something on Doctor Who because that's racing towards us on the horizon, so plenty to come from this channel. So thank you for watching this video. I hope you have enjoyed it. If you have, why not like and subscribe? If you've just stumbled across this video, subscribe. Doesn't cost you anything. Click the button. You don't even have to watch the videos. Just subscribe. Fantastic. Like as well. It's really good. If you liked it, why not say so? If you didn't like it, move on. Like, subscribe, I'll see you soon. Until I do, keep taking the stuff.